Good morning. Welcome to Sky News Breakfast. Thank you for joining us. Always a long shot, but very much in the balance. That's Nicola Sturgeon's assessment of winning a majority in the Scottish Parliament, with counting set to continue today in constituencies and regions across Scotland. But even if the SNP falls short of the 65 Holyrood seats needed for an outright victory, Ms Sturgeon is on a constitutional collision course with Boris Johnson, who's told the Daily Telegraph a second independence referendum would be irresponsible. Well, this is the current state of the parties in Scotland. The SNP hold a commanding lead with 39 seats in Parliament, a gain of 3 so far. The Liberal Democrats have 4 seats, the Conservatives have 3 and Labour 2. Our political correspondent Joe Pike reports from Glasgow.
Yesterday in Glasgow, Nicola Sturgeon was victorious in her Southside seat.
Well done, everybody.
But will that winning streak continue today? The path to an all-important SNP majority is now looking tough.
If people of Scotland vote for a pro-independence referendum majority in the Scottish Parliament, whether that's an SNP majority, which is very much in the balance and has always been a long shot, or an SNP Green majority, then that has to be respected. And that's a basic principle of democracy.
Scottish Labour have held on to 2 key marginals that the SNP were desperate to win.
10 weeks ago, people were predicting us at 14% in the polls. I think when I took over the job, people can see the energy and the enthusiasm we brought to the campaign over the last 10 weeks. I think we have got some hope and optimism.
Elsewhere, Boris Johnson has secured a big by-election win in Hartlepool.
Ben Houchin, the Conservative Party candidate, is duly elected as Mayor for the Tees Valley Combined Authority.
And Ben Houchin turned the once marginal Tees Valley mayoralty into a Tory stronghold, with a majority of 76,000. The Conservatives made yet more progress in Labour territory, winning Northumberland in the northeast, Dudley, Redditch and Nuneaton in the Midlands. There was better news for Labour in Wales, where so far the party have held their ground. And First Minister Mark Drakeford increased his majority by more than 10,000 votes. Today, we'll get the rest of the Welsh results and find out who will be the mayors of London, the West Midlands and Greater Manchester. Counting continues for a second day across Scotland, including the distribution of 56 regional seats. Nicola Sturgeon is, as expected, on course to win an historic 4th term for the SNP. If she stays in her job until next summer, she will be Scotland's longest-serving First Minister. But we still don't know whether she will win the majority. She argues will give her a mandate for a second independence referendum.
Hello.
The magic number Nicola Sturgeon needs is 65. If she doesn't get there, party pressure for a more radical independence strategy may be on the horizon. Joe Pike, Sky News, Glasgow.
Well, a challenging election so far for Labour, but the party has had some success in Wales. Mark Drakeford extended his own majority in Cardiff West by more than 10,000 votes and said his party has exceeded expectations. 8 regional seats will announce results today, but Labour is so far on 30 seats, 1 short of a Senate majority. The Welsh Conservatives have 12 seats and did manage to take Vale of Clwyd from Labour. Plaid Cymru have 9 seats, while the Liberal Democrats have 1. Dan Whitehead reports from Cardiff.
They were braced for a bumpy ride, but Welsh Labour are breathing a sigh of relief. The Conservatives had hoped to shake up seats like the Vale of Glamorgan, but in the end, voters here in Barry stuck with Labour.
Through the pandemic, I think Mark Drakeford's done very well, actually. I think he's been a safe, sure pair of hands.
I think Mark Drakeford have done very well. When you think now they're vaccinating 18-year-olds, yeah, I think they've done very well. Much better than what they have in England.
Results are still coming in, but the Red Wall in North Wales held, with Labour keeping hold of Wrexham, Allen and Deeside and Clwyd South. First Minister Mark Drakeford kept his seat, as did Health Minister Vaughan Gething, who said the party can't be complacent.
We need to be prepared to listen and to learn from whatever the results are, good, bad or indifferent, because otherwise we will lose touch with our people. During this election, though, as I say, I'm proud of the positive way we've campaigned.
It is going to be some days before we know the exact makeup of the new Welsh Parliament, but what is clear is that Labour has managed to hold most of its seats and continue its dominance after more than 2 decades.
The valley town of Merthyr Tydfil continues to be a Labour stronghold. It bore the brunt of COVID-19, putting devolved health firmly in voters' minds.
They've done a good job with this virus, because they haven't rushed to get the pubs open and all this and that.
Drakeford, he's had to do what he's had to do, but I think they could have done a bit better.
Quicker.
Quicker.
The Tories did win 2 new seats, but so far the party and Plaid Cymru have failed to disrupt Labour's reign. Dan Whitehead, Sky News in Cardiff.
Meanwhile, in the English council elections, results have so far made positive reading for the Tories. They've made a net gain of 6 authorities, while Labour has made a net loss of 4. The Environment Secretary George Eustace joins us now. Good morning to you. After the success of Hartlepool, the government and various other Conservative gains, commentators are saying that now there has been a political shift in the landscape to the Conservative Party. Is that your reading of the situation?
Well, these are a very, very good set of results for us. I mean, it's been the case now for some time that Conservative councils have a reputation for delivering services well and delivering them in a cost-effective way, so we've made further gains in those local authorities. But the big breakthrough, I think, in Hartlepool and in the Tees Valley mayoral election, these are great results for us. And I think really what it shows is some of those areas feel that the Labour Party that's represented them for a long time no longer really is in tune with their priorities. I think that the decision to leave the EU, which parts of the country like that wanted to see done and wanted that result respected, I think that probably changed things. But also they're seeing a Conservative Party that's really in touch with their priorities.
Let's talk about Scotland. Where do you stand on the possibility of a second referendum? Still results are coming in, but what is the position of the government on that?
Well, look, we had a referendum in Scotland just about 5 years ago. There was a result there. I just think as we try to come out of this pandemic and as we focus on the economic recovery as we come out of it, it really isn't the time to do constitutional tinkering and have another divisive referendum. I just don't think that is what people want. And the government's very clear that we've had a referendum and now is not the time to have another one.
But if the SNP win a majority, would you grant them that privilege of holding another referendum? Well,
look, it's something that the UK Parliament is the only one that can actually grant a referendum. That's always been the case. We've had one recently, so they've had their referendum. It was described as a once-in-a-generation referendum. We really don't think there's a case for another one, particularly as we try to come out of this pandemic and focus on the issue of getting economic recovery going and getting back in the saddle as a country as we come out of this difficult pandemic.
The Prime Minister has been quoted, I think, in the Telegraph today, saying it would be irresponsible. But would the government be prepared to go to court to actually block it? Would the government go that far?
Well, look, I'm not going to sort of get into these sort of hypothetical questions. We still don't have the full results in Scotland. I know there's speculation about what might happen. The government's got a very clear position that we just don't think now's the time for another referendum. We've had one recently. We've got more important things that we should all be focusing on, and that's our position.
You say it's hypothetical, but what is the overall plan for the union? Will you just keep saying no, or is there something else that is in the pipeline to offer?
Well, look, I think it's really important that we start that the family of nations that make up the UK, which is the most successful union in history, that we start to really work out areas where we can work together. So there's a lot of work going into policy coordination, particularly in those policy areas that used to be run by the European Union, where we've regained control, making sure that we've got UK-wide coordination. We've had the UK Internal Markets Act, which ensures that there's unfettered access around the UK internal market, and which creates, the ability for UK government to deliver and spend on people's priorities right through our United Kingdom, so that we can help get some cohesion to the UK, which has got it's the most successful union in history, and it's something that we should really nurture. It's a very precious thing for us.
Following on from the success in the local elections, some of the papers today predicting that Boris Johnson could be in power for 10 years. In fact, he could exceed the duration of Margaret Thatcher. Is that something that you predict, that you can see happening?
Well, I don't think you can ever predict elections that far ahead, and it's certainly no complacency at all on our part. These are a very good set of elections for us. We've made breakthroughs in areas where we've not represented before, but with that comes a really important responsibility for us as Conservatives, which we recognise, and that is not to let people down. We've got to deliver for those areas that have put their faith and their confidence in us. That's what we're going to be focusing on, not speculating about what might be happening in 10 years' time.
Just want to quickly talk about the travel list, the traffic light system, and the countries that have been released to be on the green list. Some of them aren't even holiday destinations at all. South Georgia and South Sandwich Islands on the green list. The only things that are there are penguins. What's the point of actually including countries like that? And actually some countries are not receiving us, even though they're on our green list.
Well, look, this is a cautious start to trying to loosen up travel. We've been cautious about loosening the restrictions throughout. Grant Shapps has made clear that we'll review these lists every 3 weeks. This is the initial list. I think it does include countries like, for instance, Portugal and Israel and Australia and New Zealand. I know it's a modest first step. Others will remain either on the amber list, where they'll need to quarantine at home, or indeed on the red list. But it will be reviewed again in 3 weeks' time. And as the situation changes and improves, more countries will be added to that green list.
Turkey's on the red list, due to host the Champions League final. Should we be pushing more to have a venue in the UK for that competition? I think Aston Villa have offered up their ground. Yes,
I understand that discussions with UEFA are taking place, and I think I'm sure that Oliver Dowden at DCMS will be engaged in this. But I think it's the case that the UK is willing to offer to host it here in the UK if that makes things easier. But obviously it would be a decision for UEFA on that particular match. The difficulty is we've had to take a decision on Turkey based on the evidence. We do so on objective criteria, and that's why sadly we've had to put Turkey on the red list.
George Eustace, thank you very much for speaking to us this morning. Let's take a look at the front pages of the morning's newspapers for you now. The day Boris blew up Labour. That's the Daily Mail's assessment of the election results. The Eye keeps things brief. Labour in turmoil, they say. The Guardian has a similar headline. The Financial Times credits the Conservatives' success to what they call Johnson's vaccine bounce. But the Express has its own theory about a bounce, saying it's down to Brexit. The Times thinks the results could keep Boris Johnson in number 10 for a decade. The Telegraph leads with the Prime Minister ruling out another independence referendum in Scotland. And the Sheffield Star is one of the many local papers across the country focusing on the elections. In their case, the shift of the city's council from Labour to no overall control. In other news, the Daily Star references the Fast Show while covering the announcement of the list of countries where Britons will soon be allowed to go on holiday. And the Sun features a story involving chef Jamie Oliver, who turned detective to track down a stolen tractor. Some of the other main stories for you now. And Kent police have identified a man whose picture was shared as part of an investigation into the murder of PCSO Julia James. The force says they're no longer seeking information about the individual in the photo, but are still keen to hear from anyone who may have information relevant to the case. At least 178 Palestinians and 6 Israeli officers have reportedly been injured at the Al-Aqsa Mosque and around East Jerusalem as tensions continue to soar over the threatened eviction of Palestinians in the Sheikh Jarrah neighbourhood. Police in riot gear fired rubber bullets and stun grenades at crowds who threw objects at them. Yesterday, thousands of worshippers marked the final Friday of Ramadan at the holy site, with many staying on to protest. Israel's Supreme Court is due to hold a hearing on the Sheikh Jarrah evictions on Monday. The United Nations has called on Israel to immediately halt all forced evictions, saying any implementation would violate Israel's obligations under international law. More than 1 million children will be given access to mental health support as the NHS expands its services in a bid to help people cope with disruption from the pandemic. Children experiencing anxiety and depression will be offered support in a bid to prevent problems escalating into serious mental health issues that continue into adulthood. NHS England says around 400 mental health support teams will work across 3,000 schools in England. The government has confirmed foreign travel for holidays can resume in just over 2 weeks on May the 17th. An updated traffic light system sees 12 countries, including Australia and Portugal, on the green list. But other popular destinations, such as France and Spain, have failed to make the cut. And the concessions to travel come with several conditions, as our business correspondent Paul Kelso reports.
No queues, no kids, and almost no passengers. Gatwick's departure halls have been empty for months, but that's about to change, with a new traffic light system replacing the blanket travel ban. 12 countries, including Portugal, Israel, Australia and the Falkland Islands, are on the green list that will not require travellers to quarantine on return, though not all currently admit Britons. Major destinations France, Spain and Greece are on the amber list, subject to 10 days home quarantine, while Turkey has been added to the red list of countries requiring mandatory hotel quarantine, part of what the Transport Secretary defended as a deliberately cautious approach.
A fortnight in the Falklands isn't most people's idea of a summer holiday. Is it realistic to think that this year we will see the return of mass travel?
Look, this is not a list generated and created to, if you like, think about where people want to lie on beaches and then twist the science to fit it. That would be completely wrong. It would go against everything that we have said.
Steve is among thousands disappointed by the news. His annual lads' holiday to Benidorm was postponed last year and he's due to pay the balance on Monday. But he'll lose the lot if Spain is still on the amber list come June.
Completely gutted. I understand that we have to be cautious, but it could have made it a lot fairer. And the way that traffic light system works, to me, it's only the wealthy or people that own their companies that are going to go and have a holiday.
Travellers can't come soon enough for destinations that thrive on British visitors, and the news at least represents a little ray of sunshine for Portugal.
If we back to 2019, we are talking about the UK being responsible for almost 6 million room night stays in our hotels, which represents about 40% of our overall international touristic demands.
Turkey's red list status means 8,000 fans of Manchester City and Chelsea may not be able to make the Champions League final, currently scheduled for Istanbul. For the rest of us, any foreign holiday this summer might be considered a result. Paul Kelso, Sky News at Gatwick.
Let's take a look now at the latest coronavirus figures, and there have been 2,490 new cases of coronavirus in the most recent 24-hour period. 15 more deaths have been reported, which means the total number of people who died within 28 days of a positive test now stands at 127,598. Another 135,470 people have received their first vaccination. 473,001 have received their second. That means more than 51.83 million jabs in total have now been given out across the UK. Time now for a look at the weather with Isabel, and I've had a quick glimpse outside. It's wet.
Yes.
Awful.
And as
grey.
the director just said, that swirly thing behind me, is the reason, low pressure. It's driving the fronts in, and yes, it's wet. I mean, the gardens need more rain, that's good.
Yeah.
And it's looking a bit warmer as well, which is such a nice treat because it's been, well, we had such a cold April, frostiest on record, and so far this month has been pretty chilly, but it will feel different today, so let's take a look.
Look forward to brighter skies. The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
So behind me then, the Atlantic depression or area of low pressure that's driving these fronts northwards across us. And as Gillian said, it is raining outside. And for all of us today, a spell of wet weather. But for some, as the rain clears later, it'll turn a little bit brighter and you will feel the effects of this southerly wind, the warmth that's coming in behind this rain band. So across southern Ireland, then central parts of Ireland, temperatures picking up to around about 17 degrees this afternoon. A few showers possible. And also southeast England, East Anglia, up to about 17 to 19 Celsius this afternoon. So very different. Hopefully some sunshine breaking through. There might be a little bit of late sunshine too across southern Scotland and northern England, but otherwise the rest of Scotland stays wet, and Wales into the West Midlands and much of Western England stays pretty wet as well. The highest rainfall totals, I should think, in a 24-hour period will be across the Brecon Beacons. As we head through this evening tonight, we're quite mild tonight. Still the remnants of our rain across central parts, gradually breaking up tomorrow, and then tomorrow it's a day of sunshine and showers.
The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Welcome back to Sky News Breakfast. Now, as results continue to come in from elections around the UK, Jane Secker is here for a look at the latest numbers. Take it away.
Yeah, thanks very much, Gillian. Well, we've seen overnight, these are the main pictures from the 3 countries across the UK that had the elections yesterday. And it's an interesting picture, isn't it? In each of them, the leader that was seen to handle the pandemic well is the one whose party has seen to do well. The Conservatives, of course, in England, the SNP in Scotland, and in Wales, the Labour Party. Let's just quickly break down some of those constituencies. In England, very different picture from this time yesterday morning. Lots of blue on the map, but with still lots of results still to declare. Remember, of course, that a lot of those blue seats that the Conservative Party has taken are very, very key ones, and they are seats that they would never have taken in the past, like a lot of those in the Midlands. And when we look at the number of seats overall, yes, there are losses for the Conservatives, yes, there are losses for the Labour Party, but by and large, it's the Conservatives that have made massive gains, the Labour Party that has lost a huge number of seats. The Greens, too, wants to keep an eye on, they've done very well. Dreadful night for the Lib Dems. Not a lot of attention on them, really, but they have not done especially well at all. A lot of attention's been focused on Hartlepool. That was the by-election yesterday. And this is a really interesting piece of graphics. This shows the numbers of people that have voted in by-elections since back 1945, since just after the Second World War. Now, until Hartlepool, every parliament since the Second World War, the vote share of the incumbent party has gone down. So that really shows you how significant what happened in Parliament in Hartlepool was yesterday. Quick look at Scotland. That's going to be interesting today. We're going to get more results today. SNP have done well overnight. They took Ayr, they took East Lothian, they took Edinburgh Central, but what's going to happen at this constituency, Aberdeenshire West? That's the key one. Keep an eye on that. If they do well there, it could really signal a very good day for Nicola Sturgeon.
Jane, thank you. Well, join me now is the Shadow Home Secretary, Nick Thomas Simmons. Good morning to you. First of all, what happened in Hartlepool, in your estimation?
Well, good morning and lovely to join you. I knocked doors in Hartlepool. I also knocked doors right across Wales. And here in Wales, we obviously did extremely well. In my own constituency, we won more votes than ever before in a devolved election. Now, when I was knocking doors in Hartlepool, in contrast to here, what I saw in Hartlepool were people who didn't believe the Labour Party stood for them, that they felt the Labour Party had drifted away from them and didn't have the answers to their everyday concerns. Whereas here in Wales, that was very different. Here in Wales, people admired the leadership through the pandemic of Mark Drakeford and also identified strongly with Labour and Labour having the solutions for the future. And I think there is a lesson for us there in terms of what we've done in Wales, what we've achieved in Wales, speaking in every single community, that we really do now need to transfer to England and those parts of England like Hartlepool, where we desperately need to do a great deal better.
So exactly what is the First Minister getting right that seemingly Sir Keir Starmer is getting so wrong?
It's not a question of Keir Starmer getting things wrong. We have a situation here in Wales where we got a developed policy agenda and a party where there is no no-go area across Wales. And that's, of course, a great thing for us and something to learn from. In terms of Keir at Westminster has had the last year in the pandemic. He's acted in the national interest. That's why we've backed, for example, things like the furlough scheme. That's why we backed the public health messaging. And it was in the national interest to do that. Keir has also made a start on changing the party. But what Keir now will do is go even faster with that change. And what I'm looking to see over the next 12 months as we move out of the pandemic is Keir able now to actually connect with the public. Keir has not actually given a speech to a room of people as leader of the Labour Party. And the Keir Starmer that I know is driven by tackling injustice, by tackling inequality. Those are the qualities that led me to back him to be the leader of the Labour Party.
You seem to be saying that he didn't get anything wrong.
Well, look, we've clearly got things severely wrong in Hartlepool. That's why we lost to the extent we did. But it is also the case that having lost 4 general elections in a row, it was never going to be turned around in 12 months. I recognise absolutely that we have a great deal to do. But my point is this, that Keir has started that work, has led courageously on things like tackling anti-Semitism within the Labour Party. He started to create that change within the Labour Party, and that's now what we've got to develop. And as we move out of the pandemic, the public will have that chance to see the Keir Starmer that I know that will be out tackling inequality at the forefront of his mission in politics. And that is something, of course, we've not been able to do to the same extent during the pandemic, but of course Keir can now do going forward and accelerate the process of change that he's put in place.
Polling yesterday by JL Partners showed that the top reason given for people not voting for Labour was Sir Keir Starmer's leadership, described as uninspiring and soft. Isn't that the real issue, that the top team has just been too cautious?
No, and I read that poll that you're referring to, and that was, I think it was about 14% of people said that. But in any event, the point is that we have to have had the leadership that we've had during the pandemic. I think that was very important. I think Keir got that judgment absolutely right. It had to be constructive opposition. I think the public rightly expected that of us, and that's what we should have done. Our priority was to save lives during the pandemic. Of course, we've called out the government when they've got things wrong at Westminster, but at the same time, we provided that constructive opposition. Now, as we move into the next phase, we're certainly not out of the woods yet with the pandemic, by the way, but as we do, that's when now Keir can set out his real passion to change our country, to make sure that we don't go back to the failed, unequal, insecure economic model of the past. And that's what I know Keir will be doing in the months and years ahead. But that is not to criticise the approach he's taken during the pandemic, because I think it was absolutely the correct thing to do.
We've seen Brexit-leaning areas moving towards the Conservatives. Is the real issue here that Sir Keir Starmer has been known in the past as a Remainer, the wrong person in this role?
No, I don't think that at all. And I knocked a number of doors in Hartlepool, and people didn't raise the issue of Brexit. It was the issue of the future, the jobs of the future, the good schools for their children, a health service that they can rely on. These are the kind of issues that are being raised to me on the streets of Hartlepool. And I know that Keir has a vision for those things, that the public services that we went into the pandemic had been undermined by the Conservatives over the previous 10 years, that he is passionate about a world-class education for every child to tackle the inequality in our society. So I know that, and what we will now do, of course, in the months and years ahead, is to show, if you like, to put the meat on the bones of that, to set out the policies, to review the policies that we have, and to have those policies that do reflect post-pandemic Britain that Keir can put before the electorate at the next general election.
Shadow Home Secretary, thank you.
Thank you.
Time now for a look at the weather with Isabel.
Look forward to brighter skies. The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
We've got rain for today. It's already raining heavily across many central and southern parts this morning, with the rain pushing right up into the north, giving a cold day there. But elsewhere, as the winds turn southerly, well, with a bit of an improvement through the course of the day, I think it'll actually feel quite nice. So it starts off wet, miserable conditions out there, but I think quite possible that across Ireland through the afternoon, temperatures could reach around 17 degrees. Southeastern parts of the country also up to about 17 to 19, with maybe a little bit of late sunshine as well. But elsewhere, it's a pretty wet picture. The rain slowest to clear northern Scotland and also dragging its heels across Wales and western parts of England. And, for example, South Wales could be in for a significant soaking. Tomorrow, that rain breaks up, though, and it'll be brighter again with scattered showers.
The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Back with us now to take us through the newspapers are the journalist and broadcaster Vidisha and former government special advisor Mo Hussein. Welcome back to you both. Starting with you, first of all, Mo, and the front page of the Mail. The day Boris blew up Labour. And there's someone looking over his shoulder in that photo.
Yes, indeed. I mean, this process did start a few years ago where we saw Labour see its worst electoral defeat in 85 years back in 2019. And yesterday was really a chance to see, has anything changed? Has any progress been made under Keir Starmer for Labour to try and reconnect with its heartlands that the Conservatives took from them? And it seems that the answer is no, not just in Hartlepool, but also in many local councils that Labour have now lost or seen their majorities certainly slashed. It's quite unusual for governments to win by-elections as well, particularly 11 years in. So I think this is a really fundamental resetting of our political system. And yes, there will be an impact around the vaccine bounce and the idea of unlocking the country and going back to a sense of normality. But it seems to me what has really struck a chord is this idea the government has spoken about a lot, which is levelling up the country, which is about jobs and investment. And now the government has to deliver on this. You know, these people who have voted Conservative probably have never voted Conservative before, and they are expecting to see the government come good on the things that they said they would deliver. So over the next few years, I think we will see a lot more focus on these parts of the country and a lot more money going into them.
Yes, and staying with that thought of the bounce, many pointing towards what they're describing as the vaccine bounce. And Vidisha, you've had a look at the Eye, the story there that under 40s will now be offered an alternative to the AstraZeneca jab.
Yes, there are lots of headlines about this, and it seems to imply that under 40s are going to be given some sort of choice of an array of drugs. But in fact, it's very telling that after a little bit of diplomatic cautious silence, government advisors are actually pushing forward the idea of those other two vaccines, the Moderna and the Pfizer vaccines, after the AstraZeneca vaccine was found in a very small number of cases, so 1 in 100,000, but there have been some fatalities, to have a link, I don't want to say cause, to have a link to very rare blood clots. And in the US, the Johnson & Johnson vaccine has found similar results because they use the same biotechnology. It's interesting to me because for a long time, the success story around the UK's vaccine rollout was all about AstraZeneca. And I do think the government advisors stayed stum for a little while because they thought, hang on, maybe this is just a case of normal results because no vaccine is 100% safe and secure. Normal results somehow being skewed or somehow this vaccine being briefed against. So there's a sense of the diplomacy, the geopolitics behind the so-called UK vaccine story. But it's very significant for me, at least, that the government advisors have put forward a clear statement saying that if possible, while the vaccine rollout is successful, while case numbers remain low and the choice is possible, in order to keep uptake going, they should get a different one.
Yeah, worrying though for those under the age of 40 who've already had the first jab of AstraZeneca, and we've been told that you can't mix vaccines. It's already been done, so yes, you can sympathise with them. To the Telegraph, Mo, what's this about weekly food recycling could be delayed by up to 8 years?
Yeah. Yes, indeed. So this was something that we thought would come in by 2023. We're now hearing it could be delayed by quite a number of years, 8 years, in fact. And this will be disappointing and surprising to a lot of people because we're seeing a really big push on the green agenda, on the environmental agenda, coming from very top of government, and it feels like, especially in the year that the UK is hosting the climate change talks as well, and the fact that we want to show some kind of leadership on this, that we should really be getting our own house in order and being able to take forward some of these measures, in this case, food recycling and other kinds of recycling. It feels like cost has become an issue and maybe just the logistics of doing this. But actually, for us to even meet any of our net zero targets and other targets in terms of greenhouse gases, we will have to make quite big changes to our everyday lives. So if this can't be done, then I just worry about the rest of it as well, in terms of actually achieving those targets and people really understanding the role that they, as a society overall, will have to play in getting these things down.
So instead of leaving food to rot in landfill, which emits methane, we're going to have it rotting at home.
Correct, exactly, and potentially for a lot longer than a week as well. So it just feels like it's not connected to what we are told the wider strategy is meant to be. And there's other things as well around exporting plastic that has not stopped happening as well. So we have the narrative, we have the high-level ambition, but what we really need to see is action on the ground to piece all of this together, to take this agenda forward and make the change that the planet definitely needs to see.
Yes, the reality very different to the ambition there. To the Sun, Badisha, and the London Mayoral contest, a little closer run thing than Sadiq Khan would have wished for.
Yes, exactly. I think that everyone had assumed that in these mayoral elections, of which the results should be coming in tonight, or if COVID protocols have delayed the count, maybe early tomorrow morning. So it would have, should have, could have been a landslide for Sadiq Khan. And Sean Bailey, the Tory candidate, was seen as being really quite far behind, almost like a sort of maverick candidate. In actual fact, yes, Sadiq Khan is doing great, but he's only 25,000 overnight counted votes ahead of Sean Bailey. Bailey has done well in traditional London suburbs and districts, including Bexley and Bromley. Neither of them have got the requisite 50% of votes that most voters would put forward on their first preference. And so this second preference rollout could go either way. Either traditionally Green and Lib Dem voters are going to think, OK, you know, it's between Khan and Bailey, so I am going to be tactical and vote for Sadiq Khan. Or they're going to say, or they would have said when they were doing it, it's more tricky than I initially thought. I'm going to vote with my heart and actually give my green-hearted vote to the Green candidate, in which case Sadiq Khan is going to be listening to all of his advisors today and early tomorrow, seeing just how close he gets.